Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala ashraf al-mursaleen, Sayyidina wa Habibina Mawlana Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa barik wa sallim, subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana, Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wa zidna ilma, ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qulubana ala dinik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of you once again. I pray that you're all well, inshallah ta'ala. Um, This is a talk I gave at UCT about probably 2 or 3 years ago, and I wanted to just put the talk in context, and I think the context is important. Um, I think we live in difficult times from an ideological perspective, um, and I'm reading some papers now on like the idea of gender in Islam, the idea of community, the idea of interpretation in Islam, and what you start realizing is that there is a definite movement that is bent on deconstructing society as it is. And that would be a deconstruction of the good and the bad, like a wholesale deconstruction of society. And what is happening is that I honestly believe, and I spoke about this before in a previous talk, is that we have ideologies and perspectives that are being foisted upon Islamic understanding, and Islam is being expected to mold and twist and reform itself into a understanding that does not emanate from itself, from an understanding that is alien to itself. And I think that is problematic because, in a sense, there is a growing attempt to even like deconstruct things that were givens for many hundreds of years. Without going to specific examples, because examples will take too long to go into. The point I want to make, and one of the issues is that Islam is within a Western university. Islam is studied as a social science. And I think it's important to appreciate that is that it's not so much that Islam is being studied, it's more that Muslim society is being studied as a social phenomena. Therefore, religious studies are often located in the Department of Social Sciences. It's seen as a social science. And therefore, the entire discussion is framed within the ambit of contemporary discussions on social sciences. And one of the main factors with regard to contemporary social sciences is that everything is a construction. Nothing is real anymore. Even the idea of community is a social construct. Your gender is a social construct. Your belief system is a social construct. And when people start using the word social construct all the time, there are two implications to it. The one implication is that it is not something which is real and concrete, it's something which is artificial, number one. And number two, it is something which can be undone and changed and reformed as people want it to be formed. And that opens a whole host of, it basically plunges people into a realm of complete uncertainty because they are completely at sea. There are no factors which solidify and anchor your perspective or your belief system. And Allah speaks about the Quran being urwatul wuthqa, a firm handhold. And a firm handhold is something which is grasped in difficult times. So I think this is the context of the talk. I I believe that the solution is that we have to use the Quran and the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the departure point for our understanding. I'll say it again. We have to use the Quran and the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the departure point for our understanding of the world and of society and of everything, and not try to kind of bring something else from the outside and then cherry pick some examples that fit into a narrative which is a pre-molded narrative and then make it seem okay. I think it's highly subjective and it's highly problematic, and it's not authentic and it's not faithful to our Islamic legacy. And so I would challenge us to rebuild our understanding of Islam directly from the worldview that Islam espouses within the divine text. So this is the context of some of the thoughts in this presentation. So I mean, there's just 4 points here which I'll go through, and we'll see how it goes, inshallah ta'ala. The first thing is that any discussion about the world from an Islamic point of view has to start with Allah. Like, it doesn't come like from the social phenomena. It doesn't, that's not where we start defining faith and reality and religion and truth and falsehood and good and bad. Any discussion has to start with Allah, because He is the beginning, He is the end, He is, and everything else is relative and contingent upon Him, Allah Ta'ala. So first of all, we have to build our worldview from the conception of Allah. Our worldview as a Muslim is fundamentally and essentially theocentric. In other words, the theos, the divine being, is at the center of everything. He is the ultimate truth, the ultimate authority within our lives. It is the ultimate hierarchy in that the fact that Allah is supreme. He is Maliki Yawmiddin. He is Malikin Nas. He has a supreme, and we have to respect that we are not kind of debating man-made philosophies. When we are speaking about Islam, we are speaking about divine guidance that emanates from Allah Ta'ala, and has to be afforded that due respect, because if you are a Muslim, we believe the words of the Quran to be Kalamullah, the words of Allah Ta'ala, not something to be played around with and kind of just construed or misconstrued in any way that we feel like. May Allah protect us, may Allah bless us. These are difficult discussions sometimes to have. So if we speak about how does the Quran conceive of Allah or present Allah, how does Allah present Himself in the Quran? And there are a number of perspectives to look at how Allah presents Himself. And one perspective would be from the perspective of transcendence and immanence. So transcendence means that Allah Ta'ala is beyond, Allah Ta'ala is different, Allah is unattainable, Allah is unreachable. So in the Quran, there is a focus on Allah being, let's say, fis sama. Fis sama could be understood as just in the heavens. Some people might translate it as, but could be understood as something which is transcendent. Allah says in the Quran, Laysa kamithlihi shay. There is nothing, there's no mithil to Allah Ta'ala, there's no likeness to Allah Ta'ala. Qul wallahu ahad, Allahu samad. Samad is the being that is complete dependence upon Him, Allah Ta'ala. So in a sense, transcendence is a being that is beyond, above and beyond, not in any spatial sense, but beyond conception. Whatever you enter into your mind about Allah, Allah is beyond that. Allah is beyond any conception that you have, even of the positive qualities of His knowledge and His faith, of His knowledge and His love, and His sight and His hearing and His creation ability. Whatever we perceive that to be, Allah is greater than that and beyond that and transcendent to that. So that is the one domain of Allah's transcendence and being above and being Rabb and being Ilah. And then imminence means the idea of Allah being close. Allah says, فَإِنِّي قَرِيب. I am close to you, closer than your jugular vein. وَإِنَّمَا تَوَلَّوْا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. Wherever you turn, there is the wajh, the face of Allah Ta'ala. And again, we don't mean this in a space-time context, but there is this idea, this feeling of Allah being close. So all religions have these two qualities, and Islam has this beautiful balance between the two. Islam has this beautiful balance of maintaining this balance that Allah is a king and a lord and above and beyond, but Allah is also close. Close enough for you and I to talk to. Close enough for you and I to whisper to complain to call out to, that He cares about us, that He looks after us, that He knows us. There's a closeness about Allah Ta'ala. And you'll find that even within Islamic sciences, many of the arguments in Aqidah or Kalam would be focused on transcendence of Allah Ta'ala, that Allah is beyond and above and unreachable. And many of the teachings of people of tasawwuf and spirituality, they would speak about Allah being close and dhawq and tasting closeness to Allah Ta'ala. These are two different. Just remind to please mute your Jazakallah khair. Please keep your mics on mute. So these are two emphasis points within the Islamic sciences that are complementary in a sense, but they have different degrees of focus. I mentioned these things. Why? Because we can't just start the discussion on worldview without speaking about Allah first, because everything emanates from Him. Now you kind of read articles about Muslim reform and Muslim society, and there's almost, it's void of any discussion about lordship and Allah, and we can't lose sight of this. And then on another plane, it's called like a more horizontal plane, is that we have what we call the aspects of Jamal, which are beauty and tenderness and softness. Allah says He is Al-Jamil, He is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Wadud, Al-Ghafur, of love and tenderness and softness. And then we have those qualities of Jamal, and then we have qualities of Jalal, of might, of superiority, of authority, of majesty. Al-Kabir, Al-Mutakabbir, Al-Malik, Al-Qahhar, Al-Qabid, Al-Aziz. These are all the qualities of majesty and might. So when we conceive of Allah Ta'ala, it's difficult to conceive of the being that's inconceivable. But Allah gives you these planes to think about Him. The plane of that He is above and beyond and transcendent from you, and you will never reach Allah Ta'ala. He's not familiar. He doesn't resemble anything. Whatever you think, He's beyond that, but also at the same time He is close and He is intimate. And on the other hand, Allah gives you this range of names, and the names in essence are infinite, and only a finite number has been revealed to us. A finite number is known to us, but the names of Allah Ta'ala are in essence infinite, because Allah is an infinite being. And these names provide us with beautiful depth in our comprehension of Allah Ta'ala. So this is Allah, and then Allah, out of His will, out of His rahmah, He creates society. And when someone, if you think about a analogy, when someone creates something, it's almost like the personality of that person, in a human sense, is in the thing. I'll give you an analogy. For example, when an artist paints a picture or does some art, you can almost see the personality of the artist in the art. You can see the qualities of the artist in the art. And in a sense, in Islam, we have the same thing, because Allah speaks about ayat. That the ayat, the qualities and the personality and the indicators of the Creator are in the creation. You can see the ayat, it's all pointing to Him, Allah Ta'ala. So this world is a world of ayat. And so now, and the greatest of Allah's creation is going to be a human being. And I think we spoke at length about the human being. And I think, again, our conception and our understanding of a human being doesn't come from Western psychology. Yes, we may use psychology to maybe illuminate certain aspects and so on, but we don't fundamentally adopt a Western psychological model and say that is what we understand a human being to be. It's incorrect to do that. We have to build these from our Islamic understanding. So fundamentally, a human being has two dimensions. He has a dimension which is a formal and of this world and of dust and of clay and lives from this world. And a human being has something which is supraformal, which is beyond formal, which is metaphysical, which is beyond physical, which is beyond this worldly realm. And both those aspects exist within you. This is by the will and by the creation of Allah Ta'ala. And your formal self is your nafs and your jism. Your nafs is the one that wants to cling to this world and wants to attach to this world and wants to eat and wants to drink and wants to procreate. And you have a jism, your physical body, yourself. And then you have a supraformal self, which is your ruh, your spirit. And your ruh is from Allah Ta'ala. It is from beyond this world. Min amri Rabbi. It's from the matters of Allah Ta'ala. And you have a qalb, which is a spiritual heart. It doesn't die. You have a qalb that returns to Allah Ta'ala. And if it's salim, you will be saved. And if it's a marad, the marad will be in the qalb. Allah speaks about, وَدِنَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ marad. فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ, in their heart is a marad. That not the physical heart, in the spiritual heart, there are ailments that affect the spiritual heart. So as we constitute our understanding of a human being, we constitute it from our own legacy, from our own text. And we spoke about this at length. And then we have Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes and this, what does Allah say about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Come. Allah says, لَقَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah has certainly bestowed a favor, a blessing, a great favor upon the believers. إِذْ بَعَثَ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ. When He sent a messenger from amongst themselves. And Allah tells us what the role of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. And therefore we are constructing the worldview from the Quran. And the role of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is three things. يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes and he makes simple, direct, straightforward tilawa of the ayat of Allah Ta'ala. Rasulullah's job is first job is simply just to say what Allah said. If Allah said قُل to Jibreel and Jibreel said قُل to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will say قُل. To make يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ. And number two, the Prophet ﷺ's mission to the believers, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, is to purify the society, to raise the society, to nurture the society, to cleanse the society. يُزَكِّيهِمْ from tazkiyah. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. And the third role is the Prophet ﷺ is a teacher. He is there to teach us, to explain to us al-kitab, the book, wal-hikmah, and the wisdom, which many scholars refer to as the sunnah. So in any conception of Islam, how can one cast aside Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because there are groupings of people who claim to be scholars of Islam who would cast aside the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How is it possible to have a faith without Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? When Allah Himself said, and Allah said this in His timeless wisdom. Allah's wisdom wasn't limited to the 7th century. Allah tells you without any restriction of time that the Prophet ﷺ is a rahmah lil alameen, is a rahmah to all of the worlds. And we understand the Prophet ﷺ to be the last messenger, the universal messenger until the end of time. Therefore, his guidance is applicable until the end of time. Therefore, we have to attach ourselves to his guidance. It is problematic for people to wholesale say, I do not follow Rasulullah ﷺ, I don't follow hadith for XYZ reasons. Those are extremely problematic. And people would want to cast aspersions on hadith and hadith sciences without understanding the science, without even having a basic knowledge of the science, without being able to even present an academic argument, just out of nafs. And this is greatly problematic. Because what you are doing is you are casting aside the message. It's not something which is light and something, oh, you're doing the latest paper and you're quoting from this scholar, quoting from this scholar. It's not just simply quoting from the scholar. It's a serious thing. And I feel that sometimes when we study religion within like a social science paradigm, almost like the seriousness and the weight gets lost. This is people's eternal salvation or damnation which we are speaking about. It's not something that's just something you just do a PhD and you get your doctor title and mashallah, you think you great scholar of Islam. It's not something which is light. You know, to talk about faith and to talk about Allah and talk about what Allah wants and Allah, the Prophet means by this and what Allah means, not something light. It is something which is extremely heavy. The believer should shudder under that weight. Not happily just quote anybody who accords to one's nafs. May Allah guide us all. وَإِن كَانُوا مِن قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. And before the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were in manifest clear error. And without the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people will be in manifest clear error. Really, there is people just too lightly just say, I don't follow hadith. Oh, hadith is all weak and unreliable and broken telephone. I don't follow it. When you ask someone, do you have studied hadith? Do you know the 5 qualities of a sahih hadith? Which like any first year Islamic studies student will know. Do you know the very first thing? 5 qualities? No, they won't know about that. But they are happy to quote some Western author, Western academic who cast aspersion on hadith and happily quote that, and not only quote that, then to internalize this as a belief, not only to internalize it, then to utter this as guidance to people. I mean, it's not something light, it's something which is heavy. May Allah protect us all. It's like very fashionable to criticize and fashionable to. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recites the book of Allah Ta'ala, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches, and he teaches through his words, he teaches through his actions, he teaches through his smile, he teaches through his qualities, he teaches through his patience. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the living Quran. And when he purifies and he grows, because yuzakki means to purify and to grow. When he does that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is the package of Islam. This is the package of Islam which has divine foundations. And we believe as believers, we believe that we are created by Allah for Allah. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun, which means that our natural disposition, our fitrah, is to want to worship Allah Ta'ala. Therefore, when people, human beings, hear about Allah, hear about the book, hear about the messenger, hear about true guidance, their fitrah responds. This is what we believe. It's a match. And this is the departure point. And this is where we construct our worldview from. And we do believe in perfection. We believe in the perfection of Allah Ta'ala. We believe in the perfection of the Quran. We believe in the kamal, the perfection of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We believe these things to be infallible. This is what makes you a believer. No Muslim believes that Allah is fallible. No Muslim believes that the Quran has errors in it. No Muslim believes that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a person of sin and a person of malice and a person of ill intention. It's not the way of believers. These are our anchor points, our foundational points. And sometimes our discussion is so far removed from these very basic fundamentals. May Allah guide us all. And yes, there is room for discussion, there is room for debate, there is room for engagement. But there are also, we can't have a discussion unless we agree on certain common fundamentals. Otherwise, there's no real discussion, it's more just like respect. Like it's very difficult for a person who's Muslim and a person who's not Muslim to have a discussion if they don't agree on fundamentals like Allah exists, like the Quran is truth, like messengers are real and they're here for guidance, and they're ma'asum, they are protected from sin. Like it's very difficult to have those discussions. So may Allah guide us all and guide our hearts, and in the end, you decide. In the end, you can listen to 1,000 YouTube talks and you listen to this person, read this article. In the end, you decide what you believe. Like Rafiddin, no one's going to force you. You decide what your children believe. You decide what your children are exposed to. My advice to you, my sincere advice to you is don't lose touch with what is essential and fundamental. And don't let your own notion of your own intelligence and your own nafs try to supersede things which are really beyond us. And just have respect. You know, if we're speaking about Allah, we're speaking about His faith. Have respect for the position that holds. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَىٰ. As for the one that has fear for the station, the position of his Lord, and for standing before his Lord, وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ, and he prevents his own nafs, his own lower self, from these baseless desires, فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَىٰ, then paradise will be this person's destination and abode. Don't lose touch of that connection to Allah Ta'ala. It's not some sort of social science we study and just some sort of whatever, we just come up with ideas and we just look for evidence and we can kind of frame new things, and it's something which is very serious, and I think that and I'll end with this, inshallah, is that Islam is something which is based on evidence. And that's why I started with the fundamental points of evidence is going to be the Quran, and it's going to be the entire life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not stuff in your life that you like and the other stuff you kind of ignore. Not the ayat you like and the other ayat you say, but that ayat, just relative to that time and whatever. But this ayat, I like this ayat here because this ayat kind of goes with my view. No. Islam is about evidence, about bayina. It's about bayina, it's about your burhan. And the evidence which is clear in Islam is the Quran and the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So any discussion, conversation must be had in light of evidence. In light of evidence. And if you're not familiar with that evidence, if you haven't studied that evidence, rather hesitate to speak and rather go study for a few years and know what you're talking about before you want to engage with that. especially if you want to undo that evidence. Because there has been about 1,400 years of scholars who have dedicated not days or 4 or 5 or 6 years, their entire lives to studying this. Not one scholar, not 100 scholars, thousands of scholars. And if people want to just like in one sentence, one swoop of a pen, I mean, one of my favorites now lately is that everything in Islam is basically male interpretive bias. As if the whole Sharia is just there because of male interpretive bias. That's why we have all the laws. I mean, that is the most superficial argument I've ever heard. Do people think that a thousand year of scholars let their own biases just run free over the text? Is that really the belief? And all of it that doesn't accord to our modern kind of liberal understanding is all about just there was bias and therefore that's why it was like that. I think those arguments are not deep enough. They're not authentic enough. They're not rigorous enough. I'm not saying that people can't have different views, but at least have views based on proper, cogent, coherent, comprehensive data, not just the superficial statements. May Allah guide us all and protect us all. May Allah forgive me for all my shortcomings. We are all just weak human beings trying to understand the divine law and the divine guidance. And in the end, Allah knows best. And may Allah bless and protect you and your families. And may Allah bless and protect our children as well. And most of all, may Allah be pleased with all of us. May Allah let our nafs and our own hawa overpower our minds. May Allah be pleased with us. May Allah guide our minds. Allahumma allimna ma yanfa'una. May Allah teach us that which benefits us. And there's no ilm except it comes from Allah Ta'ala. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We'll continue inshallah next week. Inshallah, I'll stay with the second years.